So a while ago, I did a ranking of the top 20 worst adapted heroes in the Fox X-Men universe, and now it's finally time to do the villains. What in the good goddamn gravy took so long, you ask? Well, there was some behind-the-scenes complications related to, Ol Ship Bay Opryke Ames Clay from the Etards Ray at Entryth Tway Entry Say Oxbay a Vision Day at Isney Day, but that's all cleared up now with me as the victor, and everything's good. So, let's finally continue going full steam ahead and ranking the worst of the worst adapted in Fox X-Men universe. Now, there were some pretty poorly adapted heroes, as you saw in the last list, with many being so dissimilar to their supposed comic book source material that you were left both scratching your head and banging it violently against a wall in utter rage. But the villains? Whoo boy! They make some of the lowest ranked MCU villains look like they walked straight off the comic page. And by again using the best there is at what it does 3C system, I've rated every single villain adapted from the comics into the movies of the X-Men franchise, and then ranked them from the most to least similar, quarantining off the bottom 20 least well adapted to take a look at today. With the goal, as always, to see if adapting a character well leads to better, more popular characters, or if it just doesn't matter at all and there are merits to taking massive liberties. But what are these mysterious 3Cs, you ask? Well, those would be costume, character, and continuity. Costume ranks a character's outfit or costume, their overall look, and their superficial physical characteristics. Character ranks their personality, their relationships with others, and their powers or abilities. And continuity rates their origin story, their iconic moments, and their overall place in the world, universe, or timeline. And as always, disclaimer, a character's ranking on this list is not a comment on if they're a good or bad character, only how close or similar they are to their comic book source material compared to other characters on this list. And as we go through this list, feel free to play along and say who you think is going to be the absolute worst in the comments, and then we'll see if you were right, with evidence that you ain't lying about it. So with that out of the way, let's start the countdown with the villain who ranked at number 20 of the worst adapted Fox X-Men villains, starting with Omega Red. In comics, Omega Red is an incredibly powerful and dangerous threat. He was originally a serial killer in the Soviet Union, who eventually joined the Russian military. During that time, he continued assaulting and murdering young girls until he was caught and executed for his crimes. But due to a latent mutant gene, he survived the execution and is taken to become part of a Russian super soldier program. His mutant abilities to heal from injury, as well as his ability to emit deadly pheromones that can kill in seconds, were augmented by years of experiments and cybernetic enhancement. He gained massively increased levels of strength, speed, and durability, and powerful retractable tentacles coming out of his arms. These tentacles were made of carbonadium, an incredibly durable yet malleable radioactive metal that was constantly slowly poisoning him, forcing him to use those tentacles to drain the life force of other humans to replenish his own, something he was more than happy to do. He wears a special armor that is strong enough to temporarily resist being pierced by Wolverine's claws, and is powerful enough to take on multiple heroes at once and fight Wolverine for hours on end without falling. In the movies, he's just one random prisoner in the background of Deadpool 2. We learn virtually nothing about him, and all we see him do is just yell with the other prisoners as Deadpool is brought into the prison, sit down casually and eat some lunch, and then stand up excitedly while Deadpool and Black Tom Cassidy get into an altercation. They both have chalk-white skin and blonde hair, but the movie version's build is much more average. Like all the prisoners, he wears a power-dampening collar, so we never actually learn his powers in the movies. But we do know that this version cannot have any of the cybernetic augmentations he has in the comics, since his massively enhanced strength, his tendrils and other augmentations, and his violent psychotic personality would not have been suppressed by a power dampener like that, and would make him impossible to keep just casually contained out in Gen Pop like we see him. He's basically just a background cameo. He originally had more scenes, but they all got cut. And I suspect that was because someone pointed out how pissed fans were going to be that such a dangerous, awesome character, who could easily be the main villain of an entire movie, was being done so dirty like this. Moving down to the next least accurate Fox X-Men villain, at number 19 we have Arclight. In the comics, Arclight is Philippa Sontag, a mutant with the ability to generate powerful shockwaves from her hands. She is also sometimes shown to have superhuman strength, with her mutant strength augmented by her incredible muscular training as well. She was a Vietnam veteran who was later recruited as a mercenary into Mr. Sinister's Marauders. When sent to slaughter a community of mutants living underground known as the Morlocks, Arclight and the other Marauders slaughter many of them without mercy. Later, Arclight is killed in battle, but due to Sinister having taken samples of all of the Marauders' DNA, versions of her have been cloned multiple times to serve at his bidding. In the movies, Arclight is a member of the Omegas, a group of mutants who keep away from the rest of humanity, which basically makes them the Morlocks of the movie universe, interestingly meaning that this version of Arclight is pretty much part of the group the comic version was initially sent out to kill. Their personalities are nothing similar, as the comic version is a traumatized veteran violently lashing out at the world, while the movie version is a character who assumedly has some kind of motivation about, mutant rights and the cure. I mean, she's really only here for her powers. We don't learn anything about her. The comic version is usually portrayed as being quite muscular, while the movie version is absolutely not. Though, I think they kind of tried to adapt this by making the character somewhat androgynous, so Instead of that unique metal bodysuit she wears, the movie version wears some kind of goth punk rock outfit. But despite all these obvious differences, she serves within a violent group under a powerful and charismatic leader that can project shockwaves from her hands. So, as you'll quickly see, that makes her an absolutely amazing adaptation compared to what we're going to be looking at lower down. Moving down to 18 with Archangel. In the comics, Warren Worthington III was one of the founding members of the original X-Men, going by the codename Angel due to his mutation giving him angel-like wings. After many years of heroics, his wings were severely injured and became infected, and against his wishes they were both amputated, sending Warren into a spiraling depression. The villain Apocalypse reached out to Warren and took advantage of his hopelessness, offering to restore his wings, but during the process also warped both Warren's body and mind to turn him into his thrall, recreating Warren into his Horseman of Death. With these new razor-sharp metallic wings, the brainwashed Warren could fly at much greater speeds, and each metallic feather was laced with a paralyzing toxin that he could shoot out as a projectile. Warren Worthington III is in the movies, but that doesn't matter, since this version of Archangel ain't Warren. Since they randomly decided to keep basing these movies in the past instead of the modern day after Days of Futures Past, the movie Warren would have been like 2 if he was even born yet back in 1983, when X-Men Apocalypse was randomly based. And for the first time ever, the friggin' writers decided they were going to finally start giving a crap about the X-Men timeline here of all places. So knowing that Archangel is an iconic part of Apocalypse's Horsemen, but not having access to Angel, they decided to just make up some random new angel-winged character and not even bother to give the guy a name. Because we all know what fans love about these characters is just their power, right? In the movie version, the guy who becomes Archangel is first seen as a mutant cage fighter with angel-like wings in the 80s, who is also very originally named Angel. And during a battle, his wing is severely injured by an electric fence. Looking for the most powerful mutants in the world to serve him, Apocalypse, for God knows what reason, goes to a washed-up cage fighter whose only power is having wings, and he offers to fix his injured wing in exchange for his service. To which Angel agrees when he sees how much stronger he will become. And then he's killed off in the final battle of the end. So, while the comic version of Archangel is a tragic tale of loss and manipulation involving a long-term beloved and incredibly fleshed-out character, the movie version is the story of they wanted that metal wing guy in it and did virtually no work whatsoever to flesh out the new character they made up to fill that role, and then just tossed him in the friggin' garbage when they were done. Their powers as Archangel are mostly similar, though we don't get a lot of time to see the upper limits of the movie version's abilities before he's killed off. And while the comic version has a badass blue and purple costume and corrupted blue skin, the movie version has got your standard black movie jumpsuit with some ugly-ass tattoos on his face to hideously imply the shape of the comic version's mask. Now, I do have to point out, in X-Men 3, Warren isn't ever actually referred to as Angel in the movie. And even in Marvel Comics, he wasn't the first hero to go by that name. So my own continuity nitpicking powers work against me here, stopping me from complaining too much. However, I highly doubt the writers of this movie were trying to reference Angel technically being a legacy name to a hero of past comics, since, let's be honest, we all know the writers of these movies don't know how to read. Down to 17, we've got Lady Deathstrike. In comics, Yoriko Oyama was the daughter of the scientist and crime lord known as Lord Darkwind. He'd created a process for bonding adamantium to bone that, after it was stolen from him, would later be used on Wolverine. Her father was a cruel and abusive man to his children, and eventually Yoriko slew him in revenge. But after a series of tragedies struck her life, she decided to continue her father's work. She took on the costume samurai identity of Lady Deathstrike and eventually led a group of followers to Wolverine. Both her study and to right the dishonor the theft of that research had left on her family name. But after a horrible defeat, she went much further off the deep end and decided she must be augmented to become Wolverine's equal, leading her to allowing herself to receive intensive cybernetic upgrades that turned her into a cyborg living weapon, including adamantium bones and claws that can extend from the nails of each of her fingers, as well as the ability to extend her arms and to quickly heal and repair her cybernetic and organic body parts. And using these new modifications, Deathstrike spiraled further and further into purging all of her rage and grief out on a vendetta against Wolverine and others. In the movies, they like the adamantium nails, and that's about it. This version is a mutant with a healing factor seemingly identical to Wolverine's. We don't know much of anything about her past, but at some point she was taken and experimented on by William Stryker, given the same adamantium bonding process he'd given Wolverine, but also using a mind control serum he developed to keep her completely under his control. She serves as his personal assistant and bodyguard, though we know little about her. When the serum begins to wear off, at one point we see her looking around in confusion, letting us know that she is not in control of or conscious of her actions. But when Stryker reapplies it, she returns to her docile, obedient self. Later, Stryker orders her to kill Wolverine, and after one of the most badass fights in the franchise, she is seemingly killed when Wolverine injected her body with molten hot liquid adamantium that's solidified inside of her. She lacks pretty much all of the cybernetic upgrades, specifically the creepy extending arms or any of her comic motivations, and is a mutant, while the comic version is a regular human. And instead of wearing her bizarre samurai getup, she's got the same black bodysuit of every other character in these movies. Now down to 16 with Copycat. Villain is a bit of a strong word for Copycat, but hero ain't the right one either. So since she was originally introduced in a villainous role before being mostly redeemed, just roll with it, cause either way she's nothing like the comics. In both the comics and movies, Vanessa Carlyle was a prostitute who met and fell in love with the mercenary Wade Wilson. But after Wade developed cancer, he leaves her in order to save her from the pain of watching him die. But after this, the movie and comic versions are totally different. In the movies, she is not a mutant, but just a regular human. And after Wade's transformation into Deadpool, they are able to reunite. In the comics, Vanessa is a mutant with the incredibly powerful ability to copy others' appearances and abilities down to a genetic level, able to mimic even their DNA, brain patterns, and powers after extended physical contact. While the movie version goes back to prostitution, the comic version becomes a mercenary after Wade leaves her, and she is eventually hired to infiltrate X-Force by taking the identity of Cable's old ally Domino, being so good at taking on the Domino identity that even Cable and likely Rob Liefeld had no idea who she really was. After serving within the group for a long time, Copycat forms a bond with the team and finds herself unable to fulfill her mission to kill Cable. And much later on, when the real Domino is uncovered, Copycat goes into hiding. Besides not having the comic version's powers, visually they look nothing similar, as Copycat's mutation also alters her natural appearance. And while the movie portrays her and Deadpool being nearly inseparably in love, until Disney got a hold of them, in the comics their relationship after meeting again is more antagonistic and violent. But they do return to being somewhat more amorous later in life, though nothing like the level seen in the movies. Now down to 15 with Riptide. In the comics, Riptide was a mutant with the ability to spin at incredible speeds, allowing him to both suck objects towards him and shoot them out as deadly projectiles. Alongside Arclight, he was recruited into Mr. Sinister's band of mutant mercenaries known as the Marauders. He was a sadistic member of the group, using his deadly power to effortlessly kill innocent mutants at Sinister's order, and severely injuring multiple members of the X-Men. But while sadistically pushing Colossus too far when he was trying to save Kitty Pryde, Riptide was killed in battle. But having secured samples of each of the Marauders' DNA, Mr. Sinister was able to clone a version of Riptide to serve him time and again ever since. In the movies, instead of serving Mr. Sinister, Riptide serves as a member of Sebastian Shaw's Hellfire Club, working alongside him to bring about his plans of nuclear war to kill off humanity and further empower mutant kind. We don't learn a lot about him, since he doesn't talk much, but we can infer that he is committed to the cause of mutant supremacy since he follows Shaw's plans and immediately after his defeat joins up with Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants. Though it could be he's just a jerk and likes hurting people like in the comics, but we have no evidence either way, because after this he is never seen again, since no one even remembers him from this movie or cares about him at all. And instead of having his spinning power, the movie version just has generic wind creation powers instead, able to project winds and tornadoes from his hands, allowing him to hurl opponents away as well as allowing him a limited form of flight. So, besides having long hair and being named Janos, there's not a lot of similarities here. At 14, we move even further down than that with Glob Herman. Glob was a student at the Xavier Institute whose mutation drastically alters his appearance, giving him a translucent, gel-like body that leaves his skeleton and organs visible. The substance his body is made out of is highly flammable, though at no apparent harm to himself, and he can detach and throw pieces of the substance at will. He is recruited by his friend and classmate Quentin Quire into the Omega Gang, an anti-human mutant supremacist gang within the school. When a well-known mutant is killed outside of a nightclub, Glob follows Quire and the others into the city to violently attack a group of humans they believed killed him, though the reason for his death is later called into question. The kids later start a riot at the Xavier Institute, violently assaulting Xavier in his office, and tried to rally the other students to their cause, with Glob lighting himself on fire and rushing to attack a bus of human civilians before the X-Men intervene and shut the short-lived attempt at a riot down. This whole arc is a look at the rage and feelings of injustice commonly felt in youth, as well as how often we use those feelings as a justification to vent out our own personal problems on the world and feel justified in doing so. But but in the movie he's just one of the random mutants who runs in and gets shot by the Curequake in X-Men 3. We know nothing about him. He's much older, and as soon as he enters the scene, he is shot by the Cure. He's literally only here to show a weird-looking mutant transform into a human. And sure, maybe you don't give a crap about his personality and what he represents and all that crap, but they couldn't even be bothered to make him look as cool as he does in the comics. He's just some pudgy guy wearing clothes with slightly translucent skin. Whoop-de-doo. The only reason he's even this high is he does join a riotous mutant group that follows Magneto's ideals with the word Omega in its name. Ooh. And next, it's time. We have him, the character you were all asking about on the Worst Adapted Heroes list, here because it was not his heroic side being adapted at number 13 with... Deadpool. Wade Wilson was an assassin and mercenary who developed inoperable cancer. He was offered hope and underwent a procedure to implant a healing factor derived from Wolverine into his body, making him horribly scarred from his cancer, but with a healing factor that would constantly keep it at bay. He covered this scarred face with a mask and returned to working as a mercenary, taking on jobs like finding and killing Cable and others. He uses a variety of guns as well as his 2 trademark katanas, and eventually starts wearing a harness that allows him to teleport. While initially a bit more stoic and serious, over time, either due to the cancer's effects on his brain or just the writers changing him, he developed the humorous, sardonic personality that's made him incredibly popular in the modern day. And in the movies, though they changed some things, they did a pretty good job at adapting Deadpool and his origin story. But as you all well know, we ain't talking about that version. We're talking about the completely unrelated and so hated they just rebooted him version, who appeared much earlier in Wolverine Origins. This version of Deadpool was a mercenary and soldier serving on Team X in the 70s. This version is a natural-born mutant with the abilities of incredibly fast reflexes as well as a healing factor, with his enhanced reflexes somehow allowing him to swing his swords really fast and deflect bullets being shot at him by a room full of people, which I assume would also require some form of friggin' super speed. While initially in the comics, Deadpool is a darker, more immoral character than he is now. By the time the movie came out, he developed to having a code and being a lot more nuanced. But in the movie, he's portrayed as a completely unrepentant psychopath, constantly making jokes while the team brutally slaughters a building full of people, smiling when his boss says he's going to kill a village of innocent people, and gleefully chopping those innocent people down moments later. Sometime after the team disbands, Wade is killed by Stryker, and his body is imbued with the harvested DNA of many other mutants. He is somehow reactivated and serves under the direct control of Stryker as... Weapon 11. Now, sure, this version doesn't wear a mask, but they did shave his head and sew his mouth shut, making his skin like a freakish mask. And why did they give him Cyclops' laser beams when that has nothing to do with Deadpool? Well, it was a clever way to burn the skin around his eyes off in order to make it look like the black marks on his mask. How clever. And look, instead of boring old katanas you hold, they gave him full-length blades that come out of his wrist. That I assume would make it hard to do anything with his arms when they're withdrawn. And you think your modern Deadpools are so good? He doesn't even wear his teleportation device nowadays. Our cool body horror nightmare Deadpool has teleportation abilities grafted onto his DNA as part of this absolute frickin' mess of a character. Who needs a costume, though, when you can just have a shirtless guy with some random lines drawn on his body? And you know that quippy, sardonic personality they had at the beginning of the movie that channels the spirit of the incredibly popular modern version of the character? Well, don't worry, they got rid of that for you. This version cannot talk. Just what you want out of a Deadpool. And after a very satisfying and well-choreographed green screen fight, this awesome character sadly gets his head cut off and falls to his death. Ah, man. Too bad, man. But don't worry, because if for some reason you waited until after the credits of this god-awful movie, you're treated to a special tease of his decapitated head making a weird, creepy little noise, letting the real fans know that this worthless waste of screen time can return in a Deadpool spinoff someday. Oh boy. Just kidding, none of that actually happened. What actually happened was an actual Deadpool traveled back in time and killed that hideous thing before the movie's climax. Phew! That must have all been some kind of horrible nightmare like that Green Lantern movie that thankfully never got made when that annoying guy they were going to have as the star was brutally murdered. Alright, God, enough of that. As many changes as there are to these villains, at least most of them aren't in movies that horrible. So let's move on to an assumedly better movie at number 12 with, oh god damn it, Vuk. In the comics, Vuk was an alien member of the Dabari race who crash-landed on Earth. In his efforts to escape the planet, he came into conflict with the Avengers, but later on the Avengers offered to help him fix his ship and he was able to leave and return home. He later learned, though, that Jean Grey's Dark Phoenix form had destroyed his entire world, leading to the death of most of his species. He then eventually vows revenge and travels back to Earth to kill her. In the comics, the Dabari are a plant-like species, and Vuk's main weapon of choice is a ray gun that can turn those he shoots into stone. In the movie, though, Emma Frost was a high-ranking telepathic member of the Hellfire Club. Jean Grey is manipulated by the Hellfire Club into... Wait, what's that? This telepathic blonde girl who's part of a secret society that manipulates Jean Grey into giving into her darkest repressed desires is not Emma Frost? She's actually that random green alien male who has nothing to do with any of this named Vuk. Oh, all right, let's try that again. Let's go over his species in the movies then first. All right. So in the movies, the Skrulls are a race of shape-shifting aliens who take the forms of humans across the Earth in a plan to infiltrate... Wait, what's that? The green shape-shifting aliens trying to take over the world in this movie are not Skrulls. Oh, wait, they reportedly were, according to many, many people who saw the original cut of this film, but then huge numbers of reshoots completely retooled them into being a completely different species that does not have the power to shapeshift. What the hell have I stepped into here? I am getting confused. All right, let's just simplify this and be serious. So Mastermind is a member of the Hellfire Club who manipulates Jean with his ability to create illusions. Oh, God damn it. All right, let's try this again. In the movie, the Dabari's home planet was destroyed by the Phoenix Force before it arrived on Earth. In the comics, it was destroyed after it had arrived to Earth, and to keep it simple, let's say possessed Jean Grey. In the movies, the Dabaris track it to Earth with some kind of incredibly vague plan to somehow harness its power to recreate their homeworld or some crap. While in the movies, Vuk learns of his planet's destruction upon returning to space and just simply vows revenge on Jean like a normal person. In the movies, they have the ability to shapeshift into humans they kill. In the comics, Vuk has worked with other species who shapeshifted, sure, but the Dabari themselves are just not able to do that. That's not a thing. We only get quick glimpses of his true form in the movie, but besides being kinda green, it really looks nothing the same. In the movie, Vuk seems to have whatever random abilities the plot wants her to have, including some vague form of telepathy that allows her to show Jean images and somehow influence her mind towards darkness. Or maybe it didn't have the ability to influence her towards darkness. Maybe it was just horrible writing of her saying, be dark, and Jean giving into that. I don't know. But anyways, it also stops her mind from being read, but does not allow her to actually read minds. And she also has some kind of weird ability to absorb the Phoenix Force from Jean while hugging her, but if the hug gets interrupted, she loses what she absorbed, or maybe keeps some of it. It was kind of vague about that. With all the cuts and reshoots, you think something like this would be important enough to just quickly write a line about it and film a scene for, you know? And like all the other Dabari in this movie, she is superhumanly strong, fast, and agile. And though we never saw what the third act was originally going to be, in the final version of this movie, we see Vuk killed by Jean Grey at the end, with an incredibly deep and unique exchange of, "Your emotions make you weak. No, they make me strong." Wow. Bravo! Well worth nearly a year of delays and at least $10 million in reshoots. I don't use this term often, but peak cinema. The similarities are being greenish, an alien, his planet being destroyed, and targeting Jean, and nothing else. And even that is all just a coincidence. They claimed after this movie was released that this was always meant to be Vuk and the Dabari, and that this was always the plot of this movie. But people have uncovered plenty of evidence that that is total horse crap. This whole section has been a friggin' mess, but so is this movie, so let's just move on down. To number 11. Please, 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 can I have a good movie with, oh thank God, Donald Pierce. In the comics, Donald Pierce was the CEO of a mining company as well as a high-ranking member of the Hellfire Club, though he aims to take control of the group himself. He is a cyborg, with all of his limbs having been replaced with cybernetic replacements that grant him increased strength and other abilities. After coming into conflict with the X-Men, Pierce was defeated and eventually lost his position within the Hellfire Club. Later, he resurfaced alongside other cybernetically enhanced individuals with a grudge towards the X-Men, and put together a new version of the Reavers, a small army of cyborgs with the mission of exterminating all mutants. As time goes on, Pierce becomes more and more consumed with desires of revenge and rage against mutants, and continues to replace more and more of his body with cybernetics, despite how much it makes him feel self-hating and inhuman. In the movies, Donald Pierce works for the Arclight Transigen Corporation as head of security. He leads a group of cybernetically enhanced mercenaries, called the Reavers, to track down the escaped children of the X-23 project for capture and extermination, since they'd all been deemed failures. During his mission, his group faces against Wolverine, and in the end, he is killed by the combined powers of the children he'd been pursuing. He is a ruthless psychopath, willing to torture and kill to achieve his mission. And like the comics, he is cybernetically enhanced, though in the movie, that's a much less ambitious just one arm. While the comic version is a leader, the movie version is a follower. While the comic version becomes unhinged and obsessed with revenge, the movie version is much calmer and is pretty much doing what he does because it's his job, though it's a job he seems to really enjoy. And while the comic version has a hatred of all mutants, the movie version doesn't seem to be so passionate. And besides being blonde, they don't really look or dress like each other at all. Basically, the similarities are being a cyborg and leading a team called the Reavers. But, I'll take that over whatever that convoluted crap above me was any day of the week. And here we are, the top 10 most poorly adapted Fox X-Men villains, starting with Silver Samurai. Kenichi Harada is a mutant with the power to create an energy field that he can channel through inanimate objects, usually focusing it into his katana, granting it the ability to cut through nearly anything besides insanely durable materials like adamantium. He is the illegitimate son of the Japanese crime lord Shinjin Yoshida, and uses his ability and mastery with the katana as both a criminal and mercenary across the world. When his father is killed in combat by Wolverine, his sister Marrow becomes the rightful heir of Clan Yoshida. Enraged for not being named the clan's heir, and at his sister for falling in love with and planning to marry his father's killer, he returned to try and kill both of them. After facing Wolverine in combat, he was defeated, but his sister asked Wolverine to spare his life and decided to make him her right hand and successor to the clan to try and mend their relationship and restore his honor. In the movie, Silver Samurai is not Kenichi Harada. It is instead a giant mechanized armor made entirely out of adamantium. It was created by the movie original character of Ichiro Yoshida, the grandfather of Marrow in the movies, who had met Wolverine while serving in the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II, where Wolverine had saved his life from the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. After the war, he established the Yoshida Corporation and became incredibly wealthy and powerful. Towards the end of his life, he had Wolverine brought to him to bid farewell, but in actuality, he had become obsessed with the healing abilities he'd seen all those years ago, as well as Wolverine's perceived immortality, and had dedicated his life to studying mutations until he'd found a way to harvest them and give them to humans, which he planned to do from Wolverine to himself. He developed the Silver Samurai exoskeleton to both keep him alive and be able to defeat Wolverine and cut through his skeleton to harvest his DNA. But after doing so, he was stopped from murdering Wolverine and gaining eternal life by his granddaughter and is killed. Interesting story that I personally quite like, but absolutely nothing similar whatsoever. The only thing really is him having a relation to Marrow, though as a grandfather instead of a brother. The samurai armor, and having a sword that can cut through anything, though for very different reasons. Now there are people out there who will claim that this is actually a composite character between the original Silver Samurai and his son, who uses a technologically advanced version of the armor to continue the legacy. And though that seems true at first look due to the tech aspect of the armor, in comics the second Silver Samurai was created around the same time this movie went into production. So I find that to be extremely unlikely and think it's just a coincidence. Now down to 9, we got Marrow. Marrow was a young mutant whose mutation caused bones to grow out of her face and body. Due to her appearance, she'd lived underground with the Morlocks from a young age, a community of disfigured mutants who tried to safely live apart from the violence and bigotry of humanity. After a massacre of her people by the Marauders, Marrow eventually wound up living elsewhere under a mutant with a social Darwinist ideology, and was forced to fight and kill in a world where survival of the fittest was all that mattered, eventually rising to the highest ranks of that society. Eventually, she and others escaped and formed a violent anti-human group called Gene Nation, outright slaughtering many humans and coming into conflict with the X-Men. However, later on, due to the guidance of one of her few mentors, she reached out to the X-Men and was able to soften her hateful ways, and even join the team for a time, though she's wavered back and forth between hero and villain many times since. She has the ability to control the shape and strength of those bones, including to create shielding for herself, making them into sharp spears or claws, covering her fists to make impacts stronger, or whatever else she can think of. She can also remove the growths to use as weapons or projectiles, and the bones both outside and within her are much more durable than a regular human's. In the movie, she's just a quick little cameo in Deadpool. We see her as one of the subjects being experimented on in the workshop to activate a dormant X gene. We see her being injected with likely mutant growth hormone and having bones grow from her back. It's just a little scene, but we learn quite a bit about her here that tells us that besides the bones on her back, she's nothing like the comics. For one, instead of her entire backstory of being a disfigured mutant living in seclusion with the Morlocks, this Marrow was a human who'd volunteered for this project for unknown reasons, likely due to some debilitating illness like Wade had, to have her potential dormant X gene activated. Though Marrow has worked with Weapon X for a brief time, and the workshop in the movie is an outgrowth of their Weapon X program, the situation was totally different, and this version has no association with the Morlocks, Gene Nation, or the X-Men. Her bony growths are also a lot less deformed than they are usually portrayed in comics, but she seems to just be gaining her powers here, and they could continue to mutate further. We can also assume that her initial violent personality is completely different as well, since all we see is her docilely sitting there and being injected, and until Deadpool breaks out later, it doesn't seem like there are many other people making problems in the facility. And with what we see of the other subjects, it's also likely that she either died at some point or was recruited into the organization as Ajax and Angel Dust were. So, going from a natural-born mutant who's been forced to flee from humanity to a human who's willingly being injected with chemicals to give her that appearance is a pretty drastic change. And they clearly just picked her because she has a visually distinct power, just like a lot of the mutants in these movies. Just grabbing them up solely for what they look like on the outside to parade them around in the movie like they're achieving anything, but annoying fans of the originals for changing it for no reason whatsoever, while patting themselves on the back for doing so. I guess mutants are a good metaphor for... Anywho, now we're down to 8 with Bolivar Trask. Bolivar Trask is a scientist who believes that the rising mutants is a threat against humanity, so he creates robotic guardians known as the Sentinels to protect mankind. He wrote many articles about the problem posed by mutants and eventually became part of a televised debate on the subject against Charles Xavier. He revealed his Sentinels to the world, but they malfunctioned and turned on both humans and mutants. And after learning that the X-Men were mutants who wished to protect humanity and realizing the error of his ways, he later sacrificed himself to destroy all of the Sentinels. But though he died, his ideas lived on in subsequent Sentinel programs and the desire to both control and exterminate all mutants for years since. And though a lot of the details are changed, most of the initial core idea of Trask is actually adapted fairly well in Days of Futures Past. But that's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about the Trask who was introduced earlier in real lifetime, but like 30 years later in universe, back in X-Men: The Last Stand. This version of Trask is the Secretary of Homeland Security. He works alongside the President and Beast throughout the movie. We don't learn much about him, and we don't know if he harbors any outright hatred for mutants, but he doesn't seem to be that big of a fan of them, and is one of the main people pushing for the weaponization of the newly developed mutant cure. He looks nothing similar, he acts nothing similar, his role in the story is completely different, and he has no connection to Sentinels or any specific anti-mutant rhetoric. It's likely there were tentative plans to have him connected to a Sentinel program in the future, but the franchise fell off a cliff after this movie, and we never really learned much about what happened after in the timeline. And yes, there are those who will claim that this isn't Bolivar Trask, as only his last name was stated in the movie, and that can work in fitting all of this together in retrospect. But at the time, he was clearly meant to be Bolivar, just as the Emma in Wolverine Origins was clearly Emma Frost, despite what they claimed later on. Next down to 7, we've got Viper. Viper, better known in comics as Madam Hydra, is Ophelia Sarkissian, a woman who was recruited into Hydra at a young age, eventually becoming one of the highest-ranking members of the organization, eventually even leading it herself and killing much of the other leadership. After her apparent death, she resurfaced and later killed the previous villain named Viper, taking the name for herself and taking control of a version of the Serpent Society. After they were defeated, she resurfaced in Japan as an ally of the Silver Samurai, and they worked together on many crimes and acts of terrorism around the globe, eventually forming a close bond with him. After Silver Samurai learned that his sister had been named the heir of Clan Yoshida, he headed back to Japan to kill her, with Viper agreeing to aid him, though they were opposed by Wolverine and the X-Men. She is a nihilistic, violent professional mercenary and terrorist who has led entire organizations and sometimes kills for little to no reason. She's fought against most of the major heroes in the Marvel Universe at one time or another and is a major threat. But in the movie, she's a biochemist mutant with snake powers who is working with Ichiro Yoshida to harvest Wolverine's healing factor. Alongside Yoshida's company, she develops nanobots that are able to enter Wolverine's body and limit his healing abilities, as well as help keep Yoshida alive longer. Her mutant powers give her an immunity to poisons, as well as the ability to create any toxin and secrete it out from her serpent-like tongue or retractable claws. Increased levels of strength and agility, as well as the ability to heal from seemingly fatal injuries by shedding her skin like a snake. She wears green, kinda works with a version of Silver Samurai, and uses and has an immunity to poisons. But the comic version is not a mutant, just a poison expert. And though they're both violent psychopaths, the comic version commits acts of terror and violence on a societal scale, while the movie version is a scientist intensely focused on her research and experiments. The movie version is also never referred to as Ophelia Sarkissian. She is only referred to as the likely pseudonym Dr. Green. They were clearly grabbing up comics from the arc this story is very loosely inspired by and thought Viper seemed cool, but realized they didn't actually have the rights to her since she's not specifically an X-Men character, and so just made a bunch of crap up instead. I mean, yeah, she was associated with the Serpent Society, but to turn that into her being a straight-up snake lady is a bit of a stretch, man. Not every frickin' character has to be turned into a friggin' mutant just because this is an X-Men movie, you know? At 6, we move down to Sluggo. In both the comics and movie, Sluggo is not a big character. In the comics, he's an old ally of Deadpool who worked with Weapon X. We see him while he's searching for the lost will of his old employer and is tracking down Copycat, who he believes has knowledge of its whereabouts. He finds her disguised as the twin sister of his ex-girlfriend out and about, and for virtually no reason shoots one of the two identical women, as if just by accident, before realizing, crap, I hope I didn't shoot the one that's Copycat. His reason is never really all that elaborated on, and much later, he's eventually killed. In the movies, he's even less of a character. He's the big guy Firefist tries to take out in the prison in Deadpool 2, who punches him a few times. They look nothing alike, they act nothing alike, we have no idea what his power is in the movie, but in the comics, Sluggo is never revealed to be a mutant. He's just a human with a higher level of durability than most. While, as we see in the movie, he is a mutant in a mutant prison. Every now and then you get one of these that only like 2 people in the world will maybe be upset about, so it doesn't really matter, but at that point you have to ask, what was the point of even giving this character a comic name? Just call him Big O or something. Alright, and now, finally, entering the top 5 most horribly adapted Fox X-Men villains. With it being nearly unbelievable that there are 5 more to go through after what we've seen so far, starting with Silver Samurai. Again. So, you remember the deal, right? Kunoichi Harada, mutant with the ability to channel energies through his katana to cut through just about anything, dresses as a samurai and uses his powers as a criminal and mercenary, gets pissed that his sister Mariko was named head of his family clan just because he was an illegitimate son of Lord Shingen Yoshida, and so returns to Japan to kill her and Wolverine, but is defeated by Wolverine and offered a position as the right hand and heir of the Yoshida clan. Then he goes on to continue as both an enemy and ally of Wolverine throughout the decades. So, in that last entry, Silver Samurai was not Kunoichi Harada. It was an original character for the movie, but Kunoichi Harada is also actually in this movie, and somehow he's less like the character he actually is in the comics than the completely original character was. In the movie, he is not a mutant, but a regular human. He is not a samurai, but a ninja. He is not a criminal, but is the leader of the personal ninja security force of the Yoshida family. He is not the son of Shingen Yoshida, illegitimate or otherwise, or the brother of Mariko, but is instead her ex-lover. Why do they keep making these alternate universe family members into... He does the bidding of the family patriarch, and though he loves her, he captures Mariko and subdues Wolverine with poison-tipped arrows. Later, he has a change of heart and tries to help him, but is killed by Silver Samurai. Man, stripped of his entire character and family, forced to hook up with his own sister, and killed by the character he's supposed to be playing. That's one of the most brutal adaptations I've ever seen. Sorry, man. At 4, we got Callisto. Callisto was a mutant who learned at a young age to distrust humans after an incident that led to the loss of one of her eyes. She hid in the tunnels beneath New York and eventually brought other outcast mutants together as an underground society known as the Morlocks. They held a deep resentment for humans and surface dwellers and would often kidnap or attack them, eventually kidnapping Angel of the X-Men, who Callisto planned to force to be her mate. While the X-Men attempted to free him from the Morlocks, Storm challenged Callisto to a trial by combat, with the winner taking the mantle of leader of the Morlocks. Storm wins and forces the Morlocks to both free her teammates and stop terrorizing the surface world, leading to Callisto having a hatred of Storm. Though after trying to get revenge, that hatred eventually turns into a form of respect and Callisto eventually changes her ways, with Callisto and the Morlocks becoming allies of the X-Men from time to time. Her mutant abilities give her heightened levels of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, giving her abilities like night vision, the ability to hear even the most minor of sounds, track smells across distances, and even the ability to sense tastes that have not even touched her tongue. And she also has enhanced levels of strength, agility, and incredible levels of reflexes. In the movie, they decided to adapt her sometimes wearing a leather jacket and pretty much nothing else. This version of Callisto is a member of the Omegas, a group of outcast mutants. Unlike the Morlocks, who are outcast due to their disfigured appearance, the Omegas seem to be outcasts more due to dressing like a bunch of punks. There is no evidence that they live underground, as we only see them attending an above-ground meeting of mutants talking about what to do about the newly developed cure, with the Omegas agreeing to serve under Magneto and his Brotherhood. In the comics, one of Callisto's biggest characteristics is her feelings of being an outcast due to her scars, while the movie version is just normal looking and pretty, completely lacking the eye patch that makes Callisto recognizable as Callisto. Instead of her comic powers, this movie version has the random cocktail of powers of the ability to sense where other mutants are, a power they took from fellow Morlock Caliban and just tossed onto her, as well as the ability to sense how strong their X-Factor makes them. She also randomly has the ability of literal super speed, not just enhanced agility, but the ability to run faster than the human eye can see, or even a bolt of lightning can strike, and some unidentified amount of enhanced durability as well. Whether or not she has similar levels of resentment towards humanity is not explored, as we only see her allying with Magneto to stop humans from weaponizing the cure. And though she does fight Storm throughout the movie, instead of Storm defeating her in combat and gaining her respect, she just electrocutes the bitch to death. The end. I really have no idea why they did this. Either call her some random made-up name like Quick Search, or just give her an eye patch, call these guys the Morlocks, and replace that crappy Psylocke with a crappy Caliban, and boom, problem solved. And now, somehow, we have 3 more villains to go, so let's continue the countdown with number 3, Vanisher. Vanisher is a mutant with the ability to teleport anywhere he chooses, who used his powers to commit crimes as one of the X-Men's earliest foes. Much later on, he is forcibly inducted into X-Force when Elixir implants a tumor within his brain, with the promise to remove it only if he acts as the team's transportation. Now, I ain't gonna sit here and genuinely complain about how Vanisher was adapted in Deadpool 2. Him and all of X-Force were pretty much a parody of what I've been complaining about across all of these lists, hyping up all these random comic characters who are being adapted into a movie before it releases, and then when you go see it, they really don't do much more than you already saw in the trailers, and are likely just glorified cannon fodder, in pretty much the exact way all of Team X were in Wolverine Origins. In this movie, Vanisher is said to have the power of invisibility, but during his interview into X-Force, he doesn't say anything, so Deadpool is not even sure if he's actually in the room or not. Later, we see his parachute fly into some power lines, electrocuting him to death, and quickly letting us see a glimpse of him as being played by Brad Pitt. I think it's a very funny joke, but a bad adaptation is a bad adaptation, whether it was done on purpose or not, and I guarantee there was at least one big Vanisher fan out there who was fuming throughout the entire movie. Anyway, the only real similarity is that he worked with X-Force, and he was a mutant. And somehow we still have 2 more. Dear God, who could be left? Let's see. At number 2, we come down to, oh God, no, Selene. In the movie X-Men Dark Phoenix, Selene is a mutant with the power of telepathy, who lives on a very teeny version of Genosha and follows Magneto to America to kill Jean Grey. But later kinda helps Magneto and the X-Men fight the Dabari to protect Jean Grey. Then she's grabbed by one of them and tossed out of the train and killed. In the comics, Selene is a powerful mutant sorceress who is thousands of years old. She does have telepathic abilities, but she also has the ability to absorb the life force of other humans into herself, killing them and adding their life force to her own, making her functionally immortal. She can also control people by only partially draining their life force, making them slaves to her will and giving them the ability to drain the life force of others. Selene can use those drained energies to become inhumanly strong, fast, and durable, and is able to survive pretty much all forms of physical injury, even able to resurrect from apparent death or complete destruction. She can also use the absorbed life force to reach out to objects, giving her the telekinetic ability to move them, as well as to restructure the molecules in organic matter at her whims. She can levitate and use their energies to create powerful force fields. She has psychic abilities, including the ability to both read minds and communicate mentally, the ability to mask her thoughts from other telepaths, project mental energies to weaken or injure the minds of others, and hypnotize and control others. She's an incredibly powerful sorceress, able to change her appearance at will, teleport great distances, change her form, or become intangible, project blasts of magical energy, and many other magical abilities, with what of her abilities are due to her magics and which are due to her mutations never being fully revealed. Across the centuries, she has amassed followers that worship her as a goddess. The New Mutants first came across her performing a human sacrifice in a hidden city far from civilization. They stopped her and her followers, but after seeing these mutants and their abilities, she traveled to the modern world to learn more. There, she learned of the Hellfire Club and forced her way into their organization, becoming the group's Black Queen, working to manipulate herself into complete control of the group before growing disinterested and plotting their destruction. Her long-term goal is to ascend to godhood, often through rituals involving the sacrifice of great numbers of lives, including a plan to use a technovirus that can resurrect dead mutants to raise an army of them from their graves, specifically directed at the millions of mutants killed on Genosha, as her slaves to absorb their souls and ascend to literal godhood. Selene is an incredibly powerful and dangerous threat who could easily be the main villain of an entire movie. They saw that and thought, You know, this character's great and all, but she'd be better if she looked and acted nothing like that version, was not an immortal or a sorceress, didn't have the power to absorb the life force of others, had no connection to either the Hellfire Club or had any followers. Instead of raising the dead on Genosha in a mad plan to ascend to godhood, she was just a random mutant girl who lived there, was not her own villain with her own motivations, but was instead just a random lackey of Magneto who is no more important than that hair guy she works alongside that they just made up. Yeah, oh man, we got it, dog. Fans are gonna love this one. Even with all those changes, though, she's barely a character in this movie. We learned virtually nothing about her or her relationship to Genosha or Magneto. The only similarities are that they have some telepathic ability, are mutants, and I don't know, wear black, but everyone friggin' wears black in the X-Men universe, so whatever. Why? Just why? Oh, God. And yeah, after all that, we still have one last villain who wins the dishonor of being the official worst adapted villain in all of the Fox X-Men franchise, Kid Omega. Kid Omega was a young student at the Xavier School. He is an Omega-level mutant telepath with an advanced mind that allows him to process and organize thoughts at a rate of millions of complex thoughts per second. He has incredible telepathic abilities, such as being able to scan and influence the minds of others, even being able to subconsciously affect their thoughts, an inability to be read by other telepaths, and many other complex mental abilities. He was Xavier's prized pupil at the school, though his incredible levels of intelligence and abilities made him feel out of place socially. And due to a mixture of social and personal problems, resentment at the way mutants were treated and perceived by humans, and an addiction to a powerful mutant drug called Kick, Quire developed an openly rebellious attitude towards Xavier's dreams of mutant and human coexistence, forming a gang within the school called the Omega Gang, and leading them into the city to attack and kill a group of humans they falsely believed were responsible for the death of a mutant fashion icon. This continued to escalate until on a day when the school was open to parents and human media outlets, Quire declared a riot at the school with the aims of committing acts of violence and rebellion against all humans. Quire and the others attack. You know what? Who cares? Why am I bothering to go through this here? This movie did not give a crap about this character or any of this, so why am I giving so much time to explaining him? Because it doesn't matter. In the movies, Kid Omega is that guy with the spikes on his face from X-Men 3. He's a member of the Omegas who attacks the island the Cure is located on with the Brotherhood. He has the mutant power to grow little spikes from his face that he seems to genuinely think would intimidate a guy who can control friggin' fire, with his only dangerous use of it being when he hugs a lady to death later in the movie. And then he's disintegrated, the end. They never say his name in the movie, but if you wait around until the credits, there you go, Ken Leung, Kid Omega. Wow. This is obviously not Kid Omega. This is an incredibly crappy adaptation of the completely unrelated character Quill, who is not even a villain. Now, there are people online who will claim this is Quill and that there was some kind of weird mistake made in the credits, but I call BS on this for many, many reasons. The first is that the gang is called the Omegas and are obviously a reference to the anti-human Omega Gang from the comics, making it likely the name Kid Omega was written somewhere in the script. The second is that this is the same movie that turned Callisto into Caliban and Quicksilver, and Psylocke into whatever they were going for there. They don't care which character is named what or who has what power in this movie. Third is that the people making these movies always claim this kind of BS. When fans attack the crap they just toss up onto the screen carelessly. Oh, that wasn't Emma Frost. That's just Emma. Oh, that's not the real Deadpool. We'll see him later. Oh, we were just saving Galactus' true form for a spin-off. He's not a cloud. Don't trust anything these people say after a movie is poorly received. If all of these characters were received well, they would have said it was their genius that changed them into what they are. But my most important piece of evidence is one people usually overlook. When we see him from behind, he has a literal Omega symbol shaved into the back of his head. You're telling me the guy they shaved a literal Omega symbol onto was only accidentally called Kid Omega in some kind of bizarre crediting error? Come on, man. My theory here is that they just don't care. They're all just random-ass names and powers to them. From what I've seen, my guess is that Kid Omega was in some early version of the script as a leader of the Omegas or some crap. But as things got switched around in the chaos of this production, the name remained in the script but was moved to a totally different character. And then looking through pictures of random mutants for powers, someone thought Quill looked interesting and they just tossed it onto a random character in the script who didn't have a power yet. Whatever the reason, every time you watch the movie and those credits roll, Kid Omega is the only name you're given for this character within the movie, so Kid Omega is his friggin' name. In the comics, Kid Omega represents the rage many young people feel towards society, both for not knowing how to fit into it due to their own personal issues, as well as the bigger injustices of the world that they feel powerless to affect, and how directing those violent, angry, aimless, destructive impulses towards an enemy you can rationalize justifying causing pain to can not only lead to the harming of innocents, but inadvertent harm to yourself and those you care about, showing us why the ideals of hope, tolerance, and empathy the X-Men usually try to represent are an ideal worth trying to aspire towards instead. In the movies, Kid Omega represents that the people making these things care so little about the stories they're making that they genuinely thought audiences would think a guy who can make friggin' quills come out of his face would be badass. So, whether through sheer incompetence or utter apathy, and honestly likely both, the worst adapted villain I have ever seen, Kid Omega. There you go. The top 20 worst adapted Fox X-Men villains. A lot of these honestly weren't as horrible as the characters on the top 20 worst adapted X-Men heroes list, with some actually being pretty well-liked villains like Lady Deathstrike and Pierce. It's a shame to see them listed out like this, though, and see what could have been. A riot at Xavier's plot, an actual Hellfire Club, the Morlocks, so many of these parts and lore would have been awesome to explore. It shows a real lack of imagination and ambition on these Hollywood writers. And if they'd taken the time to really try and bring some of these elements to life, maybe the franchise wouldn't have died twice, and we'd still be exploring this world instead of just having Disney strip mine these already strip mine characters for some quick old nostalgia. But whatever. What do you think? How many of these villains did you think were really good in the movies despite their changes? How many pissed you the heck off? How does this compare to how the heroes were adapted in your opinion? Next up for Fox will be the best adapted heroes and villains for comparison, which, fingers crossed, will not have to take as long as this one did. After I finish Fox, it'll be time to pick the next universe to direct my mutant ability to bring out the 3 C's upon. Let me know which one you'd like to see next in the comments. And while you're down there, give this video a like, and if I've earned it, toss me a sub and hit that bell thingy. And if you really haven't gotten enough of hearing me talk, go subscribe to me on X/Twitter, where you can watch me just say random crap all day. Anywho, until next time, see ya. But man, guys, I avoided watching it until making these lists, but my god, Dark Phoenix.